They were said to be born from smokeless fire, older than humanity, hidden in the desert winds. Travelers vanished, voices whispered from the dunes, and whole villages swore they'd seen something that wasn't human. What are these beings the ancient Arabs called Jinn? And why did people fear speaking their name aloud? The Jinn are supernatural beings created from something the Quran calls smokeless fire. Not the flames you see crackling in a fireplace, but something subtler, more intense. While humans were shaped from clay, solid and earthbound, the Jinn came from something that flickers between states, visible one moment and invisible the next. Before Islam arrived in Arabia, the desert peoples already believed in these fiery spirits. When you're walking through endless sand dunes under a merciless sun, when mirages shimmer on the horizon and dust devils spiral across empty plains, it's natural to imagine invisible beings moving through that space. So what exactly is smokeless fire? Some scholars point to lightning as the closest physical match. Lightning is fire without fuel, plasma stripped of smoke and ash. When a bolt strikes the desert, it leaves behind glass in the sand, proof of temperatures so intense they transform matter itself. Fire represents transformation. It takes one thing and turns it into something else. The Jinn, made from this element, are natural shapeshifters. Their very substance is about movement and change. Stand in the Arabian desert at noon, and you'll understand why ancient peoples connected fire with invisible beings. The air itself seems to burn. Heat radiates up from the sand in waves you can almost see. Your vision blurs. In that shimmering haze, what's real and what's illusion? Medieval Islamic scholars describe the Jinn as beings made of subtle energy. Picture something with the power to affect physical objects, but without a fixed physical form itself. Like electricity running through wires, present and powerful, but invisible. How did people know the Jinn were there if they couldn't see them? When a whirlwind suddenly formed in still air spinning toward a traveler as if it had purpose, that was a sign. When a dust storm rose up out of nowhere and just as quickly vanished, people saw intention in it. A merchant caravan camps for the night in an ancient ruin. As darkness falls, they hear it. A sound like wind, but the air is still. A sense of presence, of being watched. The merchants recite protective prayers before settling down to sleep. They're acknowledging the unseen residents of this place, showing respect, asking for safe passage. The idea of smokeless fire explains why the Jinn were never fully good or fully evil. Fire itself is neutral. A cooking fire feeds your family. An uncontrolled wildfire destroys everything. The Jinn carried the same potential for help or harm. They had free will, just like humans. When the Quran says they were created before humans, it establishes them as older, more experienced with existence itself. They've seen civilizations rise and fall. This gives them knowledge humans don't have. The subtle energy of their being allowed them to move between states. A human body is fixed. The Jinn could shift from visible to invisible, from one shape to another. This flexibility made them powerful, but also unstable. The very element that created the Jinn also limited them. Fire needs fuel, needs air, needs the right conditions. It can be contained, controlled, even extinguished. The Jinn, for all their power, could be bound by the right words, the right rituals. As Islam spread and refined these earlier beliefs, the idea of smokeless fire remained central. The Quran confirmed what the desert peoples had sensed all along. There are beings made of fire, and they share this world with us, hidden but real. Now that we understand what the Jinn are made of, the next question becomes clear. Where do they live? Where would you hide an entire civilization? Somewhere humans rarely go, somewhere empty and forgotten, somewhere on the edges of the known world. The Jinn found their space in all the places humans abandoned. A house full of people feels safe. The same house after everyone leaves feels different. The silence becomes thick. Shadows seem darker. That's exactly where the Jinn were believed to dwell. The Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, stretches across the Arabian Peninsula like a sea of sand. Temperatures there can reach 50 degrees Celsius. Human settlements are almost non-existent. For centuries, this vast emptiness was considered the primary domain of the Jinn. Travelers crossing these wastes told stories of strange encounters, voices calling from nowhere, figures seen at a distance that vanished when approached. People didn't just get lost. They crossed over, slipping from the human world into the Jinn's parallel realm. Every old building carries the weight of its past. When humans leave, these places transform. Islamic tradition taught that the Jinn favored such locations. Old forts, crumbling caravanserais, forgotten wells, houses left empty after tragedy, caves that tunnel deep into mountains, graveyards where the dead rest, ancient trees standing alone in the landscape. These locations exist at the edge of human experience. We know they're there, but we don't fully occupy them. Islamic teachings formalize these folk beliefs into a concept called Alam al-Jinn, the realm of the Jinn. Picture our world, the physical reality we experience every day. Now imagine another layer of reality occupying the same space, but operating under different rules. Most of the time, these two realms remain separate. But in certain places, at certain times, the boundary grows thin. Never pour hot water onto the ground after dark. The reasoning? The Jinn might be there, invisible to you, and boiling water would burn them. An injured Jinn might retaliate. This was about being careful. The same courtesy extended to beings you believed were present but unseen. Similar cautions governed behavior around old wells. Don't drop stones into them. Don't shout into the darkness below. The well might be a doorway to the Jinn's realm. Think of radio waves. They pass through your body constantly. Different stations broadcast simultaneously in the same space. You can't see or feel them, but they're there. The Jinn's realm was like that. Different frequency, same space. Some traditions describe the Jinn as organized just like human societies. They had families, tribes, hierarchies. This parallel civilization followed its own laws, pursued its own interests. Most of the time, Jinn society and human society existed independently, but occasionally they intersected. Believing in the hidden kingdom changed how people moved through the world. You didn't treat empty spaces as truly empty. You spoke aloud before entering an abandoned building, announcing yourself, asking permission. You showed respect at ancient sites. The hidden kingdom represented everything that exists beyond human perception and control. It reminded people that knowledge has limits. There are powers and presences in the world that operate outside your understanding. When humans expanded, building cities and roads, the Jinn retreated further into the margins. But they never left entirely. They occupied the spaces humans overlooked. The old well in an abandoned neighborhood. The basement room no one uses. Wherever humans created gaps, the hidden kingdom could persist. Having established where the Jinn dwell, we now turn to how they move through our world. What if the stranger you meet on an empty road isn't human? What if that black dog watching you from the shadows has eyes too intelligent for an animal? Shapeshifting was the signature ability of the Jinn. Angels appeared in their true forms or not at all. Humans were locked into one body, but the jinn could flow between forms like flame-changing shape in the wind. The jinn selected specific animals and appearances. Black animals were most common, black snakes especially, black dogs, black cats. When a jinn needed to move through the human world unnoticed, taking the form of a black animal provided perfect camouflage. The most disturbing transformations were into human forms. The jinn could appear as travelers, family members, friends. They could mimic voices, mannerisms, even memories. Imagine greeting your brother on the road, only to arrive home and find him already there. Which one was real? Despite their skill at transformation, the jinn couldn't create perfect illusions. The most common tell was the absence of a shadow. A jinn in human form might forget this detail. If you suspected something, you checked the ground. Footprints provided another test. Some stories describe jinn leaving reversed tracks. Others mention prints that fade too quickly or press too lightly into sand. Eyes gave them away too. Jinn eyes might glow faintly in darkness. They might not blink for unnaturally long periods. These subtle signals alerted people that something was off. Medieval texts describe shapeshifting as exhausting work that consumed enormous energy. A jinn could maintain an alternate form for hours, perhaps days, if powerful. But eventually, they had to revert to their invisible state to recover. If you found a snake inside your house, you warned it 3 times before killing it. You spoke aloud, telling it to leave, because that snake might be a jinn in disguise. If it stayed after 3 warnings, you had the right to kill it. The 3-warning system acknowledged uncertainty while providing a clear decision path. Rather than guess, you follow the protocol. Everyone knew what to do. Medieval Arabic poetry captured the strangeness of shapeshifting. Beings that walk like men by day and vanish with the wind by night. Someone appears completely normal while the sun shines, but as darkness falls, they simply cease to be. Tales of family members impersonated by jinn created deep psychological impact. Your father comes home, but something's wrong. His voice is right, but the words he says don't match his character. Is he possessed? Is he replaced? Shapeshifting challenged the idea that identity is fixed. The jinn demonstrated that form and identity could separate. The same being could be a snake, a man, a shadow, a voice. The shapeshifting stories served as warnings about deception. Not everything is what it seems. Beautiful appearances can hide dangerous intentions. This created a culture of healthy skepticism. The energy cost of transformation created interesting dynamics. A jinn pursuing a human might take several forms in sequence, but each transformation weakened them slightly. If you could recognize the pattern, you might exhaust them. The temporary nature of shapeshifting created a crucial limitation. The jinn couldn't replace someone permanently. Eventually, the energy cost forced them back to invisibility. Understanding shapeshifting helps us understand the jinn's relationship with reality itself. They existed between states, not fully material, not fully spirit. They occupied a middle ground that made them endlessly adaptable. Beyond their ability to change form, the jinn possessed an even more subtle power. Have you ever had a thought that didn't feel like your own? An urge that seemed to come from nowhere, pushing you toward actions you knew were wrong. The jinn's most dangerous power was their ability to whisper directly into human consciousness. These whispers, called waswasa in Arabic, represented psychological manipulation at its most subtle. Not possession, not control, just gentle suggestions planted in your mind like seeds. Islamic tradition teaches that every human has a personal jinn assigned to them at birth. This is the Quran. The Quran knows you intimately, having observed your entire life. It knows your fears, your weaknesses, your desires, and its purpose is to lead you astray. You're never alone inside your own head. There's always another presence there, working against your better judgment. When you wrestle with difficult decisions, that internal conflict might not be entirely internal. The Quran could only suggest, not control. The ultimate choice remained yours, but it acknowledged that choice happens in a contested space, with influences pulling you in different directions. Strange urges that seemed to come from outside your normal thought patterns were interpreted as signs of Jinn interference. Sudden mood swings with no apparent cause. Obsessive thoughts that wouldn't leave your mind. This covered what we'd now call psychological conditions. Depression could be seen as a Jinn dampening your spirit. Anxiety might be whispers amplifying fears. The framework provided explanation and treatment options. Healers used several approaches. Quranic recitation was primary. Specific verses, particularly Ayat al-Kursi, were believed to drive away malevolent influences. The healer would recite over the afflicted person, sometimes for hours. Incense played an important role too. Frankincense, myrrh, oud wood. The smoke created a barrier, purifying the space. Burning incense transformed a room into holy ground, where Jinn influence couldn't easily penetrate. Blessed water rounded out the traditional toolkit. Water that had been prayed over gained protective properties. Drinking it fortified you from within. Sprinkling it around your home created boundaries. Surveys consistently show that more than half of respondents in many Muslim-majority nations affirm that Jinn exist and can affect human lives. This isn't limited to rural populations. Urban professionals, university graduates, maintain this belief alongside their modern knowledge. The framework still explains experiences that feel real to people. Mental distress that doesn't respond to conventional treatment. Sudden behavioral changes that seem out of character. The Jinn Whispers model provides meaning for these experiences. Amulets inscribed with protective verses became common defense mechanisms. People wore them as jewelry, hung them in homes, kept them in cars. These were physical reminders of spiritual protection. The Whispers concept explained internal experiences that felt alien. You know your own mind. You recognize your thought patterns. When something doesn't fit, when a thought or urge feels foreign, the Jinn framework offered explanation. Historical records mention cases where erratic behavior was diagnosed as Jinn touch, rather than illness. Someone acting out of character might be under influence. This diagnosis carried less stigma than mental illness in some contexts. The concept of invisible beings influencing human thoughts appears across cultures, but the Jinn version has specific characteristics. The influence is subtle. It works through suggestion rather than control. It exploits existing weaknesses rather than creating new ones. This created a sophisticated model of temptation and moral choice. You're responsible for your actions because you have free will, but you're also fighting against active opposition. The Masters of Whispers operated in the spaces between thoughts, in the moments of decision. Their weapon was subtlety itself. Yet whispers were only one form of Jinn influence. Sometimes, the presence became far more direct. What happens when whispers aren't enough? When a Jinn doesn't just suggest but invades, taking control of a human body entirely. Accounts of possession appear throughout medieval Islamic medicine and theology. These weren't subtle influences. They were dramatic takeovers where the person's own consciousness seemed to retreat, replaced by something foreign. The term Mas al-Jinn, meaning Jinn touch, is still used today in traditional medicine. It describes conditions ranging from mild influence to full possession. Sudden personality changes were the first warning. someone calm becoming violent without provocation, someone kind turned cruel overnight. The shift was too dramatic, too complete to be natural. Speaking in voices not your own was another classic sign. A woman speaking in a deep male voice, a child using vocabulary and knowledge beyond their years. These vocal changes suggested another consciousness using the body. Physical strength increases defied normal human limits. Stories describe possessed individuals throwing grown men across rooms, breaking restraints that should hold them. Religious exorcists, called rakis, performed rituals to expel possessing entities. The raki would recite specific Quranic verses, particularly those emphasizing God's power. The recitation created spiritual pressure on the possessing jinn. The process often involved direct dialogue with the entity. The raki would command it to identify itself, to explain why it possessed this person. These conversations revealed that the jinn usually had reasons. Revenge for some perceived wrong, desire for the person, anger at being disturbed. Families burned frankincense, myrrh, or oud wood during these sessions. The smoke served multiple purposes. It purified the space spiritually. It provided a physical barrier. It created a ritual atmosphere. In Oman and Yemen, marine jinn, known as marid, were considered especially powerful and difficult to expel. These beings supposedly lived in coastal waters and underground springs. Possession was often linked to moral or spiritual impurity rather than physical disease. The person had left themselves vulnerable somehow. Perhaps they'd committed serious sins. Perhaps they'd visited places known for jinn activity without proper protection. This created a complex moral dimension. Was the possessed person a victim, or did they bear some responsibility? The traditional answer: both. The jinn acted with malevolent intent, but the person had created an opening. Some possession cases involved ongoing relationships between humans and jinn. A jinn might fall in love with a human and refuse to leave them alone. The human would experience strange dreams, unexplained touches, voices calling their name. The line between mental illness and possession remained contested. Some scholars insisted they were entirely different phenomena. Others acknowledged overlap. Distinguishing between them required spiritual discernment. Modern psychology views possession through different lenses. Dissociative identity disorder, psychosis, cultural syndromes shaped by belief systems. The behaviors remain consistent across time, but the interpretation changes. Yet the possession framework persists because it provides meaning and treatment within a cultural context. It contextualizes suffering within a shared belief system and points toward culturally appropriate remedies. The cursed aspect refers to a related phenomenon, curses placed through jinn assistance. A person angry at you might seek out a sorcerer who claims to control jinn. The sorcerer performs rituals to send a jinn to harm you. Breaking such curses required identifying their source and severing the connection. This might involve counter-rituals, protective amulets, specific Quranic verses. Possession and curses represent the jinn at their most aggressive. No longer content with whispers or brief appearances, they directly interfered with human autonomy. The exorcism sessions were battles of will and endurance. The raki versus the possessing entity. Hours of recitation. The jinn might scream through the possessed person's mouth, might threaten, might plead. Witnesses to exorcisms described unsettling phenomena. The possessed person's face changes, eyes rolling back, body contortions impossible for conscious control. Whether these were genuine supernatural events or psychological responses, they left lasting impressions. Having witnessed the jinn at their most invasive, we must now step back to understand the broader relationship. Not all jinn were evil. This simple truth changed everything about how people related to the invisible world. Islamic teachings classify jinn as moral beings with free will. Just like humans, they choose between right and wrong. Some are righteous, some are wicked. Most exist somewhere in between. The distinction between good Muslim jinn and evil shayatin became central to folklore. Muslim jinn supposedly lived according to Islamic principles. The shayatin actively worked to corrupt and destroy. This classification created a more nuanced relationship with the invisible world. You didn't fear all jinn equally. You showed respect to all of them, but you particularly sought to avoid angering the righteous ones. Cultural customs developed to avoid offending unseen beings. Never curse the air, because jinn might be present. Never throw stones randomly. Never relieve yourself near trees at night, as jinn supposedly gathered there. The phrase Bismillah, meaning in the name of God, was said before eating, entering rooms, or walking into darkness. This invocation served as announcement and protection. Some jinn were believed to assist righteous people, bringing knowledge or warnings, helping locate lost objects. These beneficial interactions were rare but treasured. The belief that every person lives accompanied by a Korean influenced daily etiquette. You were never truly alone. Your actions were always observed. This created accountability. Respect toward unseen entities was seen as wisdom rather than superstition. The universe was full of beings beyond human perception. Acknowledging this fact demonstrated humility and intelligence. Coexistence required reciprocal respect. Humans didn't intrude carelessly into jinn spaces. Jinn didn't intrude carelessly into human spaces. When boundaries were crossed, proper protocols restored balance. This framework created a sophisticated understanding of shared reality. The world didn't belong exclusively to humans. We were tenants, not owners. The distinction between fear and respect matters here. Fear paralyzes. Respect acknowledges power while maintaining composure. Traditional cultures taught respect for the jinn, not crippling fear. Children learned these lessons early. How to recite protective verses, when to say Bismillah, which places to avoid after dark. Coexistence also meant accepting mystery. You couldn't know everything about the jinn. You couldn't predict their actions perfectly. Some things remained beyond human understanding. The jinn, who assisted humans, supposedly did so for various reasons. Some felt kinship with righteous people. Some followed divine commands. These relationships suggested that species boundaries weren't absolute barriers. Yet coexistence was never simple. Even well-intentioned jinn remained fundamentally different. Their priorities didn't perfectly align with human perspectives. Vigilance remained necessary. This brings us to those who claimed not just to coexist with the jinn, but to control them. Some humans weren't content with cautious coexistence. They wanted power over the jinn, and they claimed to have found it. Pre-Islamic magicians performed fire rituals, drew elaborate symbols, and offered animal sacrifices. They claimed these practices forced jinn to appear and obey commands. Ancient manuscripts described formulas for summoning specific entities. King Solomon stands at the center of jinn control legends. Prophet Sulaiman, in Islamic tradition, received divine authority to command jinn and spirits. This wasn't sorcery, but a gift from God. Legends say Solomon used them to build the temple in Jerusalem and to transport massive stones. The construction feats attributed to his reign seemed to require supernatural assistance. Solomon's control was unique because it came from divine sanction. He didn't coerce the jinn through forbidden magic. God granted him this power, making it legitimate. Yet people tried anyway. The 13th century text, Shams al-Ma'arif, recorded formulas for summoning and binding jinn. It became one of the most notorious grimoires in Islamic history. Several countries eventually banned it. The book contained ritual instructions, sacred names, geometric patterns supposedly capable of constraining spirits. The text's reputation for danger was undisputed. Stories accumulated of readers who went mad, who disappeared, who suffered mysterious deaths. Rings and talismans inscribed with sacred names or symbols were thought to control spirits. These objects supposedly channeled divine power, compelling jinn to obey their bearer. Religious scholars condemn these practices as forbidden sorcery. The distinction between seeking God's help against jinn and trying to enslave them yourself was clear. Islamic law prohibits invoking jinn or seeking their aid. It equates such acts with dangerous sorcery. The prohibition recognized that claiming power over other intelligent beings led to spiritual corruption. Sorcerers offered their services for various purposes, causing someone to fall in love, bringing business success, harming enemies. They claimed to accomplish these through jinn assistance. The appeal of controlling jinn was obvious. These beings possessed powers humans lacked. They could move unseen. They knew hidden things. Having them under your command meant having capabilities beyond normal human limits. But power over conscious beings corrupts. The jinn weren't tools. They were persons with intelligence and will. Attempting to enslave them was morally equivalent to enslaving humans. Furthermore, the control was never absolute. A jinn might obey while secretly seeking opportunities for revenge. It might follow commands literally while subverting their intent. The manuscripts that survived reveal sophisticated systems, specific times for rituals, particular incenses for different types of jinn, geometric patterns drawn with precise measurements. Some scholars argue the rituals had psychological rather than supernatural effects. The elaborate preparations focused the magician's will. What seemed like jinn contact might have been internal psychological phenomena. The practice of summoning created its own mythology. Stories of successful bindings where jinn granted wishes. Tales of magicians who became wealthy through spirit assistance. These success stories drew new practitioners despite the warnings. Yet for every success story, there were cautionary tales. And those tales carried more weight. The fire that created the jinn would soon consume those who sought to control them. Folklore overflows with accounts of jinn punishing those who tried to enslave them. The pattern repeats across centuries. Arrogance meets destruction. Stories describe magicians burned alive by the same spirits they attempted to control. The jinn waited for the right moment when the binding weakened or the magician grew careless. Then they struck. Fire consumed the sorcerer from within. In medieval Yemen, failed summoners reportedly vanished in spontaneous combustion. Witnesses described seeing the magician suddenly engulfed in flames with no external source. When it was extinguished, the body was gone. Other magicians weren't destroyed physically but mentally. They descended into madness, driven insane by the entities they'd tried to command. The jinn whispered constantly, allowing no rest. They showed visions of terror. Abbasid-era legal records mention executions for alleged jinn summoning and black magic. The practice was taken seriously enough to warrant capital punishment. The execution methods themselves carried symbolic weight. Burning at the stake was common. Burn marks appearing on bodies with no apparent source were interpreted as signs of jinn vengeance. A sorcerer who bound a jinn years ago suddenly developed strange burns. They spread despite treatment. The sorcerer dies slowly, consumed by fire that medical knowledge cannot explain. Sudden combustion deaths throughout history have been attributed to jinn revenge. A person sitting quietly suddenly bursts into flames. The fire consumes the body completely, but leaves surrounding objects untouched. These stories served specific social functions. They warned against pride and forbidden knowledge. They reinforced religious prohibitions. They created fear around practices that undermined established authority. The tales emphasized that you cannot truly control fire. Fire has its own nature, its own will. You can work with it, channel it, use it carefully, but claim mastery over it, and you'll be burned. One famous story tells of a magician who bound a powerful jinn to serve him for 7 years. The jinn obeyed every command perfectly. On the final day of the 7th year, at the exact moment the binding expired, the jinn appeared in its true form. The magician tried to renew the binding, but his voice failed. The jinn spoke, "Now you serve me." The magician was never seen again. Another tale describes a group of sorcerers who attempted a joint summoning. The ritual appeared successful. A jinn of immense power appeared within their binding circle. Then it asked, "Who among you will pay the price?" The sorcerers looked at each other in confusion. Jinn smiled. That was the down payment. Before dawn, all 7 sorcerers were dead. These narratives contain a consistent theme: cosmic balance. Power taken must be paid for. Knowledge stolen has consequences. The jinn serve as agents of this balance. The stories also reveal fear of knowledge itself. Some things aren't meant to be known. Some powers aren't meant to be wielded. The boundaries exist for protection. Medieval Islamic scholars who wrote about these cases took them seriously. Their writings warned students away from forbidden texts and practices. They emphasized that curiosity could be deadly when directed toward the wrong subjects. The rebellion of fire against those who sought to control it wasn't random violence. It was justice from the jinn's perspective. Imagine being captured, bound, forced to serve someone you didn't respect. You'd wait for any opportunity to break free and retaliate. Some scholars argued that attempting to control jinn constituted a form of slavery, which Islam prohibited. The jinn were intelligent beings with souls. Enslaving them violated the same principles that made human slavery wrong. The fire that rebels also represents something deeper: nature's resistance to domination. Humans try to master natural forces completely. Sometimes we succeed temporarily, but nature eventually reasserts itself. The most chilling aspect of these tales is their patience. The jinn didn't always strike immediately. They might wait decades for the perfect moment. Then in old age, when defenses weakened, revenge came. This delayed retribution created paranoia among practitioners. Success now didn't guarantee safety later. Every ritual carried forward consequences. Living with that knowledge required tremendous courage or reckless stupidity. Yet some stories offered redemption. A sorcerer who genuinely repented, who freed any bound jinn and destroyed forbidden texts, might escape punishment. This required absolute sincerity. The tales of fire rebelling against fire served their purpose. They made forbidden knowledge genuinely frightening. They created social pressure against pursuing sorcery. They reinforced religious authority over spiritual matters. As Islam formalized its teachings about the jinn, it provided an alternative framework to the dangerous practices of sorcery. That framework would carry these ancient beliefs into the modern world. How did an ancient desert belief survive the arrival of a new religion? By being confirmed as truth rather than dismissed as superstition. When Islam emerged in the 7th century, it didn't reject the jinn. Instead, the Quran acknowledged their existence as part of God's creation. This transformed folk belief into religious doctrine. The Quran states in Surah 15, verse 27, that Jinn were created from smokeless fire before humans were formed from clay. This established their antiquity. They witnessed the early world while humans were still being shaped. Islamic scripture established the Jinn as possessing three crucial qualities: intelligence, emotions, and free will. They think, they feel, they choose. This made them morally accountable beings. Just as humans face divine judgment, so do the Jinn. The story of Iblis stands central to Islamic understanding of the Jinn. When God created Adam, he commanded all beings to prostrate before this new creation. The angels obeyed immediately, but Iblis, a Jinn of high rank, refused. He argued that he was superior, made from fire while Adam came from clay. This pride led to his fall. Iblis became the symbol of rebellion and arrogance. His refusal wasn't based on inability, but on choice. He chose not to obey. Iblis was cast out and became Shaitan, the adversary who works to lead others astray. This narrative explains the origin of evil without making God responsible for it. Evil comes from the choices of free-willed beings. Iblis chose pride over obedience. That choice cascaded through history, affecting both Jinn and human realms. Islamic law prohibits invoking Jinn or seeking their aid. This prohibition is absolute. Attempting to contact Jinn, asking for their help, making deals with them, all of this falls under forbidden sorcery. The reasoning is clear. It undermines reliance on God and opens doors to spiritual corruption. The Quran emphasizes that Jinn, like humans, can choose faith or disbelief. Some Jinn are Muslims, following Islamic teachings. Others are disbelievers. This creates a parallel spiritual struggle. Just as humans wrestle with faith, so do the Jinn. Surah 72, called Al-Jinn, describes a group of Jinn who overheard the Quran being recited. They were amazed by its message and returned to their people as warners. This passage suggests the Jinn can receive divine guidance. Some Muslims believe Jinn still listen to Quranic recitations today. They might be present during prayers, invisible but attentive. Your worship isn't just between you and God. There might be unseen witnesses. The classification of Jinn within Islamic cosmology replaced older pagan fears with structured spiritual understanding. Instead of chaotic spirits requiring appeasement, Islam presented the Jinn as part of an ordered creation. They have their place. They have their rules. They answer to the same God humans do. This framework reduced anxiety while maintaining respect. You didn't need elaborate protective rituals against every possible spirit. You needed faith in God and adherence to Islamic practices. Say your prayers. Recite protective verses. Live righteously. The Jinn's ability to choose faith meant they weren't all enemies. Muslim Jinn supposedly respected believers and avoided harming them without cause. This created potential for peaceful coexistence based on shared religious identity. However, Islamic teachings strongly discourage seeking relationships with even righteous Jinn. The risk of deception was too high. A Jinn claiming to be Muslim might be lying. Better to focus on your relationship with God. The concept of divine judgment applying to Jinn had profound implications. It meant they faced consequences for their actions. A Jinn who harmed innocent people would answer for it. This justice system created accountability that earlier pagan beliefs lacked. Islamic scholars debated various aspects of Jinn nature. Could they reproduce? Yes, they had families and children. Did they eat and drink? Opinions varied. How long did they live? Much longer than humans, but they weren't immortal. These scholarly discussions treated the Jinn as a subject worthy of serious study. They weren't dismissed as folklore. They were analyzed like any other aspect of creation. The prohibition on sorcery involving jinn carried severe penalties. Islamic law considered it a major sin, sometimes punishable by death. Courts in various Islamic empires actually prosecuted and executed people for practicing sorcery. Yet the prohibition created an interesting question. If jinn were real and powerful, why forbid contact so strongly? The answer lay in the dangers involved. Even successful contact corrupted the practitioner. It shifted reliance from God to created beings. Islamic cosmology placed the jinn in a specific tier of creation. Above humans in some ways, they were created first and possessed certain powers we lacked. Below humans in other ways, humans were honored by being made in a special form. Neither species was absolutely superior. This balanced view prevented both excessive fear and dangerous arrogance. You didn't need to live in terror of the jinn, because God's power exceeded theirs infinitely. But you also couldn't dismiss them as irrelevant. The story of Prophet Solomon demonstrated what righteous authority over jinn looked like. He didn't enslave them for personal gain. He used them to serve God's purposes. His control came from divine grant, not forbidden magic. Modern Islamic scholars continue debating the jinn's relevance in contemporary life. Some argue that belief in jinn possession has declined inappropriately. Others suggest many cases attributed to jinn actually involve psychological issues better addressed through medical treatment. This tension between traditional belief and modern understanding creates challenges. How do you honor scriptural truth while embracing scientific medicine? Most scholars advocate both approaches. Mental illness is real and should be treated medically. Jinn influence is also real and might occur. The jinn under Islam became more than folklore. They became theology, law, cosmology. They shaped how believers understood creation, morality, and spiritual warfare. Now we must ask, what happened when this ancient belief system met the modern world? Do beings born from ancient fire still burn in an age of electricity and screens? The answer, for millions of people, remains yes. Belief in jinn persists prominently across the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. This isn't marginal superstition. Surveys repeatedly show that substantial majorities in many Muslim-majority nations affirm jinn existence. Urban professionals believe, university graduates believe. The ancient conviction survived modernity. Religious exorcisms called ruqya continue in clinics, mosques, and private homes. Practitioners advertise their services openly. The practice adapted to contemporary life while maintaining traditional methods. Quranic recitation remains central. Reports of hauntings and possessions appear regularly in newspapers and online platforms. A family experiences unexplained phenomena in their apartment. Objects move without cause. Voices echo from empty rooms. Sometimes religious authorities investigate. Sometimes medical professionals get involved. Often, both approaches run parallel. Psychologists working in the region note that many patients interpret mental distress as jinn interference. Depression becomes a spiritual attack. Anxiety stems from whispers. This interpretation shapes how people seek help. Mental health professionals face a delicate challenge. They must respect cultural beliefs while providing effective care. Many adopt an integrative approach. They offer psychiatric treatment while acknowledging the patient's spiritual framework. Some clinics now employ both psychiatrists and religious healers. Patients receive medication and therapy alongside ruqya. This combination addresses both biological and spiritual dimensions of distress. Modern films and literature portray jinn as metaphors for various concepts. Energy that can't be controlled, trauma that haunts invisibly, the unknown that lurks beneath surface reality. Cases of alleged Jinn activity continue circulating in urban legends. Moving objects reported in homes. Sudden unexplained fires. Electrical surges that damage equipment. Strange sounds recorded on audio devices. Skeptics attribute these phenomena to natural causes, hoaxes, or misinterpretation. Believers see them as evidence confirming what Scripture already told them. The debate rarely resolves because both sides interpret evidence through different frameworks. In contemporary surveys, belief in Jinn outnumbers belief in ghosts in most Arab nations. This distinction matters. Ghosts represent souls of dead humans. Jinn are separate beings, never human, always other. People who reject ghost stories might still affirm Jinn existence because the latter has scriptural support. Social media amplified Jinn stories. Videos claiming to show possessions go viral. Photos supposedly capturing Jinn forms circulate widely. Online forums discuss experiences and share advice. The internet gave ancient beliefs new platforms and wider audiences. This digital spreading creates both problems and opportunities. Misinformation multiplies. Hoaxes get shared as truth, but genuine questions also find answers. People experiencing disturbing phenomena can connect with others who've had similar experiences. Young people show interesting patterns in their beliefs. Some reject Jinn entirely, considering them outdated superstition. Others maintain belief while reinterpreting it through modern frameworks. Still others embrace traditional understanding fully. Educational systems in many countries teach about Jinn as part of religious curriculum. Students learn the Quranic verses mentioning them. They study the theological implications. This formal education ensures each generation encounters the concept authoritatively. Medical professionals sometimes encounter situations that challenge their scientific training. A patient displays symptoms that don't match any known condition. Treatments that should work don't. The patient insists Jinn are involved. Some doctors refer to spiritual healers. Others maintain their scientific approach while respecting the patient's belief. The concept endures as one of the oldest living belief systems about unseen intelligent life beside humanity. From pre-Islamic Arabia through medieval empires to contemporary nation-states, the Jinn persisted. They adapted to new contexts. They survived religious transformations. This persistence suggests the Jinn serve ongoing psychological and social functions. They explain experiences that feel real but lack obvious natural causes. They provide frameworks for dealing with uncertainty and fear. They maintain humility about human knowledge. Whether the Jinn exist objectively or represent something else entirely, their impact remains undeniable. They shape how millions of people understand reality. They influence behavior, ritual practice, medical choices, and cultural production. The fire that birthed the Jinn thousands of years ago still burns in human consciousness. It flickers in hospital rooms where ruqya is performed. It glows in smartphone screens sharing possession videos. It smolders in the minds of believers navigating between tradition and modernity. The Jinn remain what they have always been, beings at the boundary of human understanding, forcing us to question what we know and what we can never fully grasp. As the world grows more connected and more rationalized, the Jinn adapt. They find new spaces in the gaps that progress creates. They remind us that for all our knowledge, mystery persists. For all our technology, we remain uncertain about what shares this world with us. The ancient belief survives because it addresses something fundamental. The recognition that reality extends beyond what we can see, measure, or control. Fire burns on, invisible but real, destroying and creating, just as it did when the first Jinn emerged from smokeless flame.